Dankeschön is the only German that I know. Dankeschön, Christa. It's a great, we'll be speaking in English, and I think there's a facility for interpreting, übersetzen, is that the word? And we'll be speaking in English, German, and French, and I hope that we're going to be very successful. We're very excited to be here with you, and it's my, can you hear me? Yeah. And it's my great honor to be chairing this amazing panel. It's my first time in Cologne to be talking about translation, so we're very honored that you have come. But before we do anything, which I didn't tell my co-conspirators here, I'm going to engage you in a song to welcome them. Is that okay?
Of course.
All you have to do is say da da. But you have to be melodic. But you'll get it as we go forward, okay? And we'll sing it for each one of them, so don't worry, that's how the African thing works, okay? You think is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. So, who shall we start with? That side, this side, we start this side, okay? Zuki swawito e, la la e, la la e.
Ah, come on, guys.
Jugi dendo gebie, la la e, naivero nene, la la e. No, la la. You'll get it. Da 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 da, da 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 naniwe. Bangeda yo, yamae namutu, Adani switoe, da e, jugi dando gebie, naivero nene, emi witoe, jugi dando gebie, naivero nene. Introduce yourself.
Dear.
Can you say that? Say it again. La la jugi den don't get the la la naivero nene la da da da. No da 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 naniwe wangela yo. Now we're going to stand and you're going to welcome me. You are actually welcoming yourselves. Thank you. So we're here today to talk about a very serious subject about education and languages and the place of books and knowledge. That's what we're here for. And many of you know that according to the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, that language is one of the fundamental human rights. Everybody has a right to life, but everybody also has a right to language. Unfortunately, in our African context, because of history, of which many of you are aware, because of colonialism, and because of power issues within societies in Africa, children have not always been able to access their mother tongues as a universal human right. As you can see, we're here speaking to you in European languages, which in itself is a manifestation of this removal from our fundamental human rights as Africans. It's really important at this stage in our history that we're starting to reflect more strongly in terms of policy and practice about the important place of African languages in our lives. And this conference and festival and this session is a manifestation of some of the challenges, opportunities, threats, and potential for African languages. I'm a translator, and I've been overjoyed at the human capacity to transfer stories through languages. And as we heard yesterday, we are, I think Susan Kiguli it was, who cited Gugi and said that monolingualism is carbon dioxide to humanity, and multilingualism is oxygen to humanity and our human interactions. So it's a real great pleasure now. Welcome Zuki and Adonis and Remy. And I will not. I told everybody to pronounce my sister's name. Pronounce it again for me. Day. Yes, you see, I'm bad too. So it's again my great pleasure to welcome you. So I won't speak anymore, but to say thank you for having us here. We'll go in order. I'll start with Sukiswa on my left. And everybody will speak for 2 or 3 minutes. And then we're going to have a little conversation between us. You can stop us for clarification if we're speaking too fast or the interpreting isn't very clear, and we will be happy to come in and explain things. If something isn't clear, if a notion or idea is not clear, just ask for clarification. Okay? Thank you so much. Zuki.
Right. I didn't realize how important what Krista asked me to do would be, but now it looks like it's important because now I have notes here. My country, South Africa, has 11 official languages. And yet, as far as everybody else is concerned, only 2, English and Afrikaans, are the ones that are used in education. And what this does is then it marginalizes the other languages. And this is largely due to our apartheid legacy. There was no deliberate plan to invest and to improve in the African languages, and the same thing continues to this day. So now it's not strange to hear promotion of monolingualism by parents who nonsensically state, "My child only speaks English." You know, my mother's country, Zimbabwe, where I went to school, has 3 official languages: English, Shona, and Ndebele. Sadly, while many people in Matabeleland and Midlands speak all 3, most Shonas only speak English and Shona. This is because since Zimbabwe independence in 1980, there's been an unspoken rule of standard Shona as a language of hegemony. Indeed, during the Matabeleland atrocities in the early 80s, the ability to respond in Shona to the notorious 5th Brigade militia marked the difference between life and death. In Kenya, where I stay, while many people speak English, Kiswahili, and their mother tongue, Luo, Kalenjin, Kikuyu, the languages in school are often English and Kiswahili. The latter, which is a living and breathing language, where new words are created with technological advancements. In this way, then, the countries that are doing well allow the education systems to be bilingual, while many only ever offer English, French, and Portuguese as the language of instruction. And this is really part of what I and many others are working to change. Parents often mourn the unavailability of books in mother tongue instructions, and in South Africa, there are organizations that are changing that. So for instance, I wrote a children's book some years ago, which many of you will be familiar with. But I mean, of course, you don't know the version that I did. You're all familiar with Rapunzel, yes? So I did an African retelling, and it's called Refilwe, and instead of being on a tower on whatever, my Refilwe is on a cave on top of a mountain, and she's got dreadlocks. What happened with that book is it was translated to all the 11 official languages, and it was this that kind of led me. A friend of mine came when I started the publishing company and said, can you do this? and can you publish this? And I said, I need to read the stories first because that's how I am. And so she gave me this, and I liked it very much. And it's an anthology of 12 children's stories. We've got 2 bonus stories. I still wanted to remind everybody else that I'm a writer still, so I have one of the bonus stories. and so we've got 12 stories from 12 writers from 8 African countries. But then what I decided to do, because I liked the project so much, is I took the liberty to translate it into my mother's language, Shona, so that a lot of children will be able to access it. But I also got a friend of mine whose Xhosa is much better than mine, and another friend to do the Xhosa translation. So at least we have 2 of my children's language, my mother tongue and my father tongue covered. And and we have a Kiswahili one awaiting, but we're still looking for funding. But essentially, that's what we did with that. And you're all familiar with the Guter Institute, yeah? Some of you, or it's just something that only us in the developed world know, in the developing world know. Okay, so earlier last year, the Guter Institute asked me. They said to me they'd be interested in changing their literature program, and I said that would be amazing. And then they said, okay, what do you have in mind? So I said, well, we have a lot of writing for adults, we have a lot of writing for children, we don't have enough writing for young adults, who are the largest population on the African continent at the moment. And so we did a call out, and we had 435 submissions from 28 African countries. It didn't matter how old you were. So the oldest person who gave us a story was 85, wow. And the youngest was 13. And after that, we did workshops in 8 cities on the African continent. So Dakar, Lomé, Dar es Salaam, Lagos, Accra, Nairobi, Joburg, and Kigali. And from that, we then got 17 short stories. And people could submit either in English, in French, or in Kiswahili, which was very exciting because when I initially pitched, I asked for Portuguese. But none of the Portuguese-speaking countries had come on board. So when Dar es Salaam, when Guter Institute decided that they wanted to come on board with Kiswahili, I was very excited because now we have an African language. And so, of course, it resulted in this book. That's the Kiswahili version. And that's the English version, What Are Birds on the Lake Shore? And that's the French version, which was published in Dakar. So, yeah. That's it. So we're doing something.
This is very exciting for me, and I hope to be able to put my hands on those books at some point. And it's my pleasure now to turn to Adonis. It's quite heavy.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I prepared something, but then I chucked it away, and I had to on my way here yesterday. I scribbled down something. I would like to invite you to think what it means to say I have a mother tongue, and also I would like to invite you to consider that for some people to say they're multilingual, it also means they are multiply wounded. Because learning a new language, it could come as a result of war, of abandonment, of forced migration. So a language isn't necessarily something to be celebrated, or I should say the acquisition of a new language isn't always something to be celebrated. It's something that also some of us at least have to think about as something similar to carrying a wound. So I'm one of those people who go around and say, actually, I have no mother tongue. Reason being, so when I was 2, my father was murdered, and when I was 3, living in Sudan, my mother left. And then I learned that the departure of bodies might also mean the departure of a language. Because after my mother exited my life, I fell silent for a while, for a long time actually, and I didn't want to talk. It was as if she had taken with her whatever it was that made a language a mother tongue. And so I have replaced it with my own silence. Since then, I've begun to view being native to a language is not tied to a land, but to mothers and fathers and their presence in your life. For a long time, departure and my resentment of talking, of needing to forfeit a mother tongue in a state of disbelief, as the beginning, I consider it as the beginning of my linguistic disability. Because no language since then would ever replace Tigrinya, which I spoke with my mother before she left. And even though I speak Arabic, English fluently, I do speak them with psychological traumas. Since, like I said before, they have been acquired as consequences of wars, forced migration, and parental abandonment. This belief is the reason why, when I moved to Brussels 8 years ago, I refused to learn French and Dutch. Not because I'm not able to, but I just didn't want to carry more wounds than I was already carrying. And because, as I was writing my second novel, I decided to adopt the language I have conceived for myself as a child. And so the title of my second novel is Silence is My Mother Tongue. So this is it from me. I just felt like to sit here today, and I'm sure we'll discuss more, but to me it's really important for people to think what they mean when they say I have a mother tongue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, beautiful statement. What does it mean to say I have a mother tongue? This applies to me as well. I was asked to send an abstract, and this is what I wrote. A language at home, another language with the neighbors, a third language for negotiating at the market, and then at school, 2 former colonial languages as optional languages, and I went for German. And in German we had to learn interesting structures. I'm going to give you an example. Nowadays in Germany, who speaks like this? Wem gehört das auf dem Tisch stehende Glas? You were speaking of being multiply wounded. I was wounded in French, I was wounded in English, and then came German. We were beaten for not being able to write Wem gehört das auf dem Tisch stehende Glas. Then you come to Germany as an adult, you use that a sentence and look at you and say, who comes then here? What language do you speak? So what's my mother tongue? Is it a language in which I dream? Is it a language in which I can express my feelings better? Is it the language I speak to my father, my mother, my neighbors? Even the concept mother tongue in linguistics, we've stopped using it, by the way. We speak of language of primary socialization, L1, L2, and so forth. And this reminds me of one interesting saying by the giant Nelson Mandela. I quote him: if you speak to a person in a language they understand, you're speaking to their mind. And you speak to people in their language, you're speaking to their heart. So, what is my mother tongue? I don't have an answer to that. I'm also multiply wounded, people see it as being talented when you speak 11 languages like our dear friends we had yesterday. But if you look at the linguistic biography, you will see that learning these languages was also connected to multiple trauma, and I'm glad we put this here. Then I came to Germany when I was 21. As a Cameroonian, deciding to go to take Swahili, that was the next, wound. Being asked by Africans, this is one of my colleagues, Samuel Ndogo, when we got to know some years back, he was kind of Cameroonian and taking Swahili, fascinating. Welcome to the family, bro. But the Cameroonians will look at me and say, mon frère, tu es en allemand, c'est tout ce que tu as trouvé à faire. Is that all you find interesting to do in Germany? People come here to take technology, computer science, and so on, and you stupid black guy, you leave Cameroon to come to Germany to take Swahili. And I said today, nimefuari sana, because Swahili has changed my view of life. It has opened my mind, and have given me access to a different world. And I'm still working on that when it comes to another languages like Shikomori. I'll end with Shikomori. Here we're sitting with pupils. It's very important to have them around. Thank you for being around. It's important for young Europeans or young international people to know what is happening in the world. My current research field is the Comoros Archipelago in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and Mozambique. And here you have what they call the archipelago, the Comoros Archipelago. People grow up speaking 3 languages. Well, 4. Shikomori, Shinzwali, Shimweli. And when they get to school, and by the way, the 4th language is Arabic, which is then the language of religion. But since one of the islands, Mayotte, is French, meaning part of the European Union, once they get to school, they are told what Gugi was told decades ago. You have to erase your mind. This is language of barbarity. You have to stick to French. So we're not speaking about post-colonial states. We are speaking about actually what is still happening. In some of the places of the world, we are still talking about neo-colonial mindsets. And it will be important to talk about this. Thank you.
Maharaba, Rem. Marahaba. So we have Day now. Day, you see, I can say your name.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis très heureuse de me retrouver ce matin avec vous. Je vais vous parler du multilinguisme dans les systèmes éducatifs. Je suis sénégalaise. Je viens du Sénégal. L'Afrique passe pour le continent du foisonnement linguistique. Même si les chiffres supposés le prouvent sont souvent exagérés, cette réalité en partie résulte de la fragmentation coloniale. Ça facilite d'une certaine manière l'imposition de l'anglais, du français et du portugais. Lorsque l'enfant africain va à l'école, c'est dans une de ces langues européennes qu'il doit appréhender le monde pour acquérir le savoir.
Afrika gilt eben als der Kontinent der Fusion der Sprachen. Selbst wenn die offiziellen Zahlen, also von denen man meint, dass sie das beweisen, oft übertrieben sind, dann ist es doch, handelt es sich hier doch um eine Realität, die man nicht verneinen kann. Und dies hat eben das vereinfacht, dass Englisch, Französisch und Portugiesisch so dominant werden konnten. Wenn ein afrikanisches Kind mit der Schule anfängt, dann wird es eben in einer dieser kolonialen europäischen Sprachen unterrichtet werden. Und eine dieser Sprachen wird es sein, die dazu dienen wird, ihm Wissen beizubringen.
On peut dire que les contenus pédagogiques ont été africanisés d'une certaine manière, mais ça n'empêche pas toujours que ce sont les langues étrangères qui sont dominants dans les systèmes éducatifs. Et cela est un problème dans tous les sens.
Zwar sind die pädagogischen Inhalte in den Schulen in gewisser Weise sozusagen afrikanisiert worden, aber das ändert nichts daran, dass die europäischen Sprachen beziehungsweise eben die aus Sicht der Kinder Fremdsprachen das sind, womit sie lernen müssen, und das stellt einfach, bringt verschiedene Probleme, und zwar in alle Richtungen.
L'enfant africain, comme presque tous les enfants du monde, découvre le monde à travers sa langue maternelle. Cette langue est littéralement sa respiration existentielle. Mais dès son entrée à l'école, il va se trouver brutalement dans l'obligation d'utiliser une langue étrangère pour communiquer avec son enseignant et ses camarades, pour également traduire sa pensée, analyser son environnement, exprimer ses émotions. Le fait que de manière si soudaine, les mots et les choses ne coïncident plus du tout est dans son jeune esprit la cause d'un trouble profond. On sait que pour nombre de spécialistes, le développement de l'enfant s'effectue dans un modèle plus harmonieusement, dans un modèle éducatif basé sur sa langue maternelle.
Wie jedes andere Kind entdeckt das afrikanische Kind die Welt durch seine Muttersprache. Sie ist sozusagen die Art, wie es atmet, wie es die Existenz atmet. Aber sobald es in die Schule kommt, wird es auf sehr brutale Weise dazu verpflichtet, in einer Fremdsprache sich auszudrücken, mit dem Lehrer, der Lehrerin zu kommunizieren, mit den Kameradinnen zu kommunizieren, seine Gedanken, seine Gefühle auszudrücken. Und auf diese Weise entsprechen plötzlich die Dinge überhaupt nicht mehr den Worten. Sie haben nicht mehr so viel miteinander zu tun wie vorher in der Muttersprache. Und es ist mittlerweile mehrfach von Wissenschaftlern gezeigt worden, dass das sehr tief emotional verstörend ist.
Il faut noter toutefois que la rupture n'est jamais totale. Je crois qu'on peut appeler cet écartèlement le fait que l'enfant utilise sa langue maternelle, c'est-à-dire ses propres mots, les mots de sa tribu et les mots de la langue de l'autre. On peut appeler cet écartèlement un bilinguisme alterné. C'est un peu ce que l'écrivain sénégalais Cheikh Hamidou Kane, auteur de l'aventure ambiguë, appelle, c'est ce qu'il essaie de corriger. En somme, l'école de la vie réelle corrige les travers de l'école nouvelle. C'est de cela dont parle Cheikh Hamidou Kane dans l'aventure ambiguë. Mais ce n'est pas une consolation, car le multilinguisme mal maîtrisé impacte négativement les performances scolaires de l'enfant, tout en l'amenant à mépriser de manière consciente ou non sa propre langue, c'est-à-dire sa langue maternelle.
Man kann auch natürlich anerkennen, dass diese Entzweiung niemals total ist. Das Kind navigiert zwischen der Muttersprache und der Fremdsprache. Dennoch kann uns das nicht darüber hinwegtrösten, dass diese Bilingualität auf brutale Weise eben sich nicht angeeignet wurde, sondern aufgedrückt wurde. Und wie es Cheikh Hamidou Kane in seinem Buch L'aventure ambiguë, also sozusagen das zweideutige Abenteuer beschrieben hat, ist es eben etwas Zweischneidiges. Und diese unfreiwillige Mehrsprachigkeit hat einen negativen Einfluss auf die Schulleistungen der Kinder.
Le tableau que je viens de dresser, ça n'incite pas du tout à l'optimisme. Mais comment trouver une solution? On peut, par exemple, trancher le nœud gordien en substituant les langues nationales aux langues étrangères. Ce n'est pas une solution très réaliste. Elle peut même causer des dégâts importants. La tendance actuelle est d'éviter une autre rupture brutale qui laisserait à l'enfant tout aussi confus que dans le monde extraverti que nous vivons de décrire. Le plurilinguisme est une façon raisonnable, mais encore une fois, l'Afrique n'étant pas un seul et même pays, on ne saurait proposer ici une panacée. Je dirais 2 mots sur le Sénégal, mon pays. C'est un pays où de plus en plus des voix s'élèvent pour proposer le plurilinguisme. En vérité, le Sénégal aura introduit les langues nationales dans son système éducatif d'ici une décennie. Je le crois. Du reste, d'autres expérimentations ont eu lieu avec les l'UNESCO. Les résultats semblent probants car l'État vient de décider d'étendre le cadre expérimental à 6 régions du pays sur 14 et pour 6 langues nationales.
Was ich gerade beschrieben habe, stimmt natürlich nicht gerade optimistisch, aber was kann es für Lösungen geben? Eine Idee wäre natürlich, die Fremdsprachen durch die nationalen Sprachen zu ersetzen, aber auch das würde neue Probleme mit sich bringen und würde die Kinder auch nochmal verwirren. So einfach wäre das nicht umzusetzen. Im Senegal, in ihrem Herkunftsland, melden sich jetzt immer mehr Stimmen für Mehrsprachigkeit, aber eigentlich sind schon seit 10 Jahren nationale Sprachen in die Schulen hineingebracht worden. Der Staat hat gerade erst, einen Moment, genau, es hat verschiedene Modellprojekte, verschiedene Experimente gegeben mit der Hilfe der UNESCO. Die Ergebnisse scheinen positiv zu sein, denn man hat diese Experimente ausgeweitet auf 6 Regionen von 14 und für 6 nationale Sprachen.
L'aménagement linguistique, Cheikh Anta Diop, qui est l'auteur de Nationale et Culture, a proposé un aménagement linguistique depuis 1954. Aujourd'hui, on peut dire que cet aménagement est en train d'être entré en vigueur. Il se traduira à terme par la généralisation de l'enseignement du Wolof qui sera accouplé dans chaque région avec la langue dominante. Que dire du français? Les avis continuent à diverger, même si le débat se poursuit. Certains, une minorité francophone très active, veulent que le français conserve son statut de langue première, ce qui signifierait que les jeunes vont apprendre le Wolof, le Pulaar, le Joola à partir de la langue de Molière. Oui. Louise Marie Diop Maes proposait quant à elle en 2007 à Bamako dans un texte intitulé Instauration d'un système éducatif rationnel et fonctionnel, le modèle finlandais aux décideurs sénégalais. Dans son schéma, le français continuait à être appris par les jeunes sénégalais à partir de leur langue nationale. À mon humble avis, ce sera mieux pour tout le monde. La grande romancière de langue wolof, Mamie Niang, avait coutume de dire: si j'ai d'excellents résultats en français, c'était d'abord parce que je maîtrisais parfaitement le wolof. Il faut dire aussi que la famille peut prolonger l'école, car les parents, connaissant la langue d'enseignement de leurs enfants, peuvent s'impliquer dans sa formation.
Was Cheikh Anta Diop seit 1954 mit Nationale Culture, also schwarze Nationen und schwarze Kultur, vorgeschlagen hat, wird langsam umgesetzt. Es wird letztlich sich darin ausdrücken, dass Wolof allgemein in den Schulen gelehrt werden wird. Und mit dem Französischen sieht es so aus, dass da die Meinungen immer noch sehr auseinandergehen. Es gibt eine sehr aktive, frankophile Minderheit, die unbedingt will, dass Französisch diesen Status als wichtigste Sprache behält, was bedeuten würde, dass die Kinder Wolof, Pulaar und Joola ausgehend von der Sprache Molières lernen würden. Louise Marie Diop Maes hat 2007 in Bamako in Mali in einem Text vorgeschlagen, das finnische Modell anzuwenden im Senegal und danach würde die französische Sprache weiterhin von den jungen Senegalesen, aber ausgehend von den nationalen Sprachen gelernt. Meiner Meinung nach wäre das sehr viel besser für alle. Wie es Mame Yunus Dieng gesagt hatte, wenn ich so gute Ergebnisse, so gute Leistungen im Französischen erbringen konnte, dann deswegen, weil ich perfekt Wolof konnte. Man muss auch sagen, dass die Familie die Leistung der Schule quasi verlängern weitertragen kann, weil nämlich die Eltern, weil sie die Sprache, die Lehrsprache kennen, sich dann einfach an seiner Ausbildung beteiligen können.
Donc, que les partisans de l'ouverture au monde se rassurent. Plus tard, l'enfant va découvrir d'autres langues. Le multilinguisme est source d'épanouissement sur tous les plans, sur le plan individuel, collectif, professionnel et social. Du reste, plus on sait de langue, plus on est susceptible d'être accepté par les locuteurs de celle-ci. Permettez-moi de conclure par le fameux mot du grand poète sénégalais Serigne Moussa Ka. Bépp làkk rafet na muy buy yee ci nit xel ma di tudd ci jaam ngor la. Ça veut dire toute langue est belle, qui éveille l'esprit humain et redonne à l'être asservi le goût de la liberté. Une belle leçon d'humanisme qu'il faudrait traduire dans toutes les langues du monde. Cela ne ferait de mal à personne. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Man kann aber darauf vertrauen, dass das Kind mit der Zeit immer mehr Sprachen entdecken wird und dadurch auch die Welt neu entdecken wird. Die Mehrsprachigkeit ist eine Quelle der Entfaltung auf allen Ebenen, auf der individuellen, kollektiven, professionellen und sozialen Ebene. Außerdem, je mehr Sprachen man kann, desto höher ist die Wahrscheinlichkeit, dass man von den Leuten, die diese Sprache sprechen, akzeptiert wird. Ich möchte am Ende schließen mit dem großen senegalesischen Poeten Serigne Moussa Ka. Jede Sprache ist schön, die den menschlichen Geist aufweckt und dem Wesen einen neuen Geschmack von Freiheit liefert. Das ist eine sehr schöne Lektion in Humanismus, die man am besten in alle Sprachen der Welt übersetzen sollte. Das würde niemandem schaden. Vielen Dank.
Danke.
Thank you very much. We've heard a lot of different ideas from the joy and beauty of multilingualism to the trauma that languages can also bring to people. Can you hear me? The trauma that languages can also cause to people. And these two ideas seem to me to be at the far extreme. A lot of joy and trauma on the other side. I think this is particular to the African situation and to the colonized situation. But I think that the question is more complex than this. As you can hear, the more all of you speak, the more complex it is to me. And it just struck me now, it's something I've been struggling with, and maybe it's something we might want to discuss. Our presence as Africans in these languages has tamed them a little bit, I believe. Our presence has brought new and beautiful things to languages which have been harsh and cruel to us. We have transformed them to gentler languages and made the owners of those languages more human, I believe, because of the colonial experience. On the other hand, we are proposing reintroducing or developing our African languages, which because of history have been neglected and ignored for a long time, so they have yet to grow and to develop. And I want to start with you, Zukiswa, because you're working with the children's books in translation. Is this something that you have experienced? And is it something that you find a challenge or something that you find as an opportunity?
Is what? Sorry.
You know, our languages have been disrupted, so, so they're not as...
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things that has happened with a lot of African languages is, I think that there are exceptions, obviously, like Kiswahili, you know, but a lot of African languages have not developed beyond, you know. So for instance, there is no word for a computer, there's no word for a cell phone, there's no word for a SIM card, there's no word for like an application, and so forth and so on. And in order for a language to breathe, in order for a language to grow, it needs to be a living, breathing language. So I think there is need for people to do the same thing, and that perhaps Swahili does, and have like annually go to a retreat where you have the journalists, you have the academics, you have, you know, the writers, and they decide to come up with new words for different things so that the languages can continue breathing. Otherwise, you know, a child, my son is 14, and when there is no word in his Xhosa or in Shona for a laptop, you know, he's looking at me because how does that work? And do I really need to know this language?
Okay, the same question to you, who talked about trauma and finding your own place of safety. And again, it's the same question. How do you address these extremes of trauma and potential joy that language yields? And you're a writer, so obviously you have to engage with the words.
I would really definitely say it's an ongoing thing. I'm one of those people who actually sometimes believe in the extreme, because the way to compromise isn't necessarily the best option, you know. And so how do you, for example, balance within your body the need, you know, if you carry that kind of, how do you, for example, make a language exist within your body and not let it, for example, traumatize you? And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, because, you know, speaking the language is a continuous reminder of that trauma itself. And I think one way is, I think, and that's something I fell in doing, you know, subconsciously, which is to make my writing very poetic, for example. And I think it's all as a result of, you know, living with all those kind of different feelings and emotions. And so the language, as a result, it comes out definitely more beautifully than it used to when I started writing, for example. So I think my body, is pacifying the language itself. But outside my body, I have no answer to that question, which is very, very difficult, and it's very, very important one as well. Like, for example, you know, I speak to my mom, when I call my mom, now she lives in Eritrea, and the conversation is hilarious sometimes, because there's that barrier, like, you know, I can't really express to her my feelings, and neither can she, you know, so we both are caught, and we both are growing older, obviously, and so you just have to, sometimes, I always say there are some wounds that you can heal and some wounds that you really can't heal, you can't, and so it's about acceptance, the limitation of the fact that our language isn't or will never be perfect. That can make sense.
Wonderful. Remy. So many languages.
Yeah.
And now you're out into our ocean, the African Ocean, in the channel of Mozambique.
Yeah.
And there you talked about the different experiences of the Arabic as a conquest language on top of French.
Yeah.
Then you have the Comoro, for example, and their relationship, for example, with Mayotte, which is in itself traumatic, and you're from somewhere else, you're here in Germany. Your trauma must be deep, my brother. Anyway, how do you deal with these extremes of within yourself as Adonis and the other speakers, Zukiswa, have talked about? You're also an academic, so part of you is also being invited to be rational, non-emotional, objective. How do you manage the bodily space and the public space? As Adonis has just said, that pacifying the public language is more challenging because you obviously don't always know who you're talking to. How do you manage this?
Wow. Multiple trauma. Is there any psychologist in the venue? I think that's the next thing to do after this roundtable. I have to walk to the person. Well, there was a diversity trainer and diversity psychotherapist in the venue yesterday. Maybe I should go to her for some help. Yeah, I've always seen this. This language is both has a blessing and a curse. It always depends on from your angle of approach. As a kid, it was a privilege to be able, to sift through all these identities, because multiple languages means also multiple identities that you can perform depending on the context. People, whenever you talk to somebody from, let's say, Ethiopia, or this morning or someone from Ghana, you say you're from Cameroon, the next question is, from which part of Cameroon are you? And I like, most of the time, sometimes I say from the Fefe part. Say, what is that? I say, Fefe is the language spoken in the western part. Because the answer they expect is for me to say, I'm from the French part or from the English part. You see already how, it's French part. And sometimes when I'm in a good mood, I say, well, I'm full Cameroonian. Because I grew up and I went to school in the French-speaking part, and for the university, I went to the English-speaking part, which is Boya. So then I say, well, I had the privilege at least to be in touch with two cultures in Cameroon. And let me give you an anecdote, maybe that can help us understand how deep this trauma can be. I'm sure you've all heard of the African Union. Do you know what languages the African Union speak?
English.
Oh, great. These are attentive people. What about the European Union? What languages does the European Union speak?
All the languages.
Only 28 languages. So whenever there's a meeting in Brussels, interpreters, translators, and so on, they are busy. But when it comes to the African Union with 54 countries, you have basically English, French, some Arabic. They introduced Swahili as a working language in 2004. As a working language. But if you Google the website of the African Union, we don't have the version in Swahili yet. And in 2006, was the African Union declared 2006 as the year of African languages. Fascinating. 2006, the year of African languages. And then you had the transition. Joachim Sisamo was the former president. He decided to give his farewell speech in an African language, and he took Swahili. Because during the revolution time, the guy was in the eastern part of Congo, and he learned Swahili. When he finished, he passed the floor to Olusegun Obasanjo from Nigeria. May his soul rest in peace, who was to be the next president. And he said, well, I'm going to practice, to continue what my predecessor has just done. I'm going to give my welcoming speech in another African language, Arabic. And imagine what was happening in the venue that day. Most of the delegates standing up to look for interpreters. And I asked myself, is this what an African Union is supposed to look like? And that day I started thinking, maybe one of the first rules to ever apply or to be considered as a potential ambassador of the African Union should be, then you should be able to read, write in at least an African language. If not, I think you're not qualified for that. Trauma and healing. I admire people, young people from Cameroon who leave places like Cameroon to go to France, to Belgium, to study medicine. But they have a problem when they go home. And I have here an elder brother from Cameroon. I hope he can jump in whenever necessary, especially because he's a professor of translation studies, which makes it very interesting. When these people go home, they have a major problem. They cannot talk to their patients in the language that their patients understand. I hope you see the problem. How do you tell an elder person in the Bamileke region, vous souffrez d'une hernie discale? So that the person will understand what is wrong with her and follow and take the medication. So this is how far the trauma can be. To finish with Mayotte again, as it happens in research, it's not the public part. Most of the time we come to topics, if scholars admit, it's most of the time by chance. You read, but at the point you start seeing connections. I was invited to the Centre Universitaire et de Formation de Mayotte in March 2015 for a conference. That was the first time. When I received the invitation, I was kind of, wow, Mayotte. I've heard of it, but by the way, is it really? And you do what we all do nowadays, you Google. That was the first thing. Oh, it's close to Mozambique and Madagascar. Okay, interesting. Not too far from Dar es Salaam. It became more interesting. And now the next step, how do you prepare for the trip? What do you need? The kind of visa and stuff like that, and that was my shock. Oh, you don't need a visa because it is Africa, it is Europe in Africa. The currency there is the euro. Then you get to Mayotte, and there's a real problem with the system. You have kids growing up in these different languages, but when they get to school, because of the French hegemony, especially Mayotte, they really have to make a tabula rasa and just delete whatever they had on their memory to move to French. And I told my colleagues after the first examination, when I read the papers, I went to my colleague and told him and asked him, what do I mark? Do I mark the knowledge they try to give back, or do I mark the language? Because if I were to mark the language, that year, that was 2016 was the first year I had to teach. 2015 was the first year for a conference. There were 23 students, and I told him if I were to mark the language, only 2 persons will pass. Only 2. Because I called them ingénieurs de son. They were sound engineers, just transcribing what they've heard. Their French is miserable. It is miserable. They are French on paper, they are French on their mind, but how they write French, it is miserable. And there's a very simple explanation to that. It is not their language of primary socialization. They were not prepared for that trip, for that to get to French all of a sudden. So I've taken the decision to say, I'm marking the content and see if I'm giving the grade depending on the kind of content they gave me back. I'm not marking the language. I said, if you have a problem with that, stop inviting me, because I cannot be held responsible for the misachievements of the system until the university. Because it implies that actually 90% of these folks will have to go back to secondary school. And this is a kind of training. It's what he's sitting in this room. Information déformante. These are words by Boubacar Boris Diop. He's just hiding himself right behind. The great writer from Senegal, please give him. In one of his texts, he's saying, as a child, he had to sing Nos ancêtres, les Gaulois. The French, our ancestors of France. He's sitting here, and he speaks of, he's using the concept, la formation déformante. So a training which is actually disempowering instead of empowering people. So I'm sitting in between this. In my classes, I always tell the students, there is the theoretical part, but if ever you want to do anything with me as a student, as latest when it comes to thesis supervision, you have to be able to answer 3 questions. Why do you want to do it? 2, how do you want to do it? And 3, what has it got to do with damn reality out there? If you cannot answer these 3 questions, I'm not available to supervise your thesis. That's my intellectual approach. Thank you.
I would like to ask you the same question. You talked about when a child is born and they discover the mother tongue like breathing. And then they go to school, and then the rupture occurs because, as Remy and the other speakers have said, they need to now speak the other language, often the foreign language. And you talked about the brutality and the confusion that occurs in the children's mind. And you said in the end that we need to find the positive side, and that language is beautiful. How do you marry this broad spectrum in raising a child, as Sukiswa has said, in just trying to publish these beautiful books? How can we as adults, or even with the children, how can we bridge this big space?
Merci. En fait, l'enfant qui naît, il grandit, il naît dans une langue. C'est à travers cette langue qu'il communique avec ses parents, avec ses camarades. C'est la langue qu'il sait, parce que c'est sa langue maternelle. Quelques années après, on l'amène à l'école, c'est-à-dire l'école du colonisateur pour l'Afrique. Alors là, on ne doit pas lui apprendre sa langue maternelle. C'est la langue de l'autre. Donc c'est avec cette langue qu'il sera désormais obligé de communiquer avec son enseignant, avec ses camarades. C'est une rupture brutale. Non seulement c'est une rupture brutale, mais commencer l'école par l'enfant avec une langue étrangère, c'est l'amener d'une certaine manière à mépriser, qu'il en soit conscient ou inconscient, à maîtriser sa langue maternelle. Parce que c'est comme si on lui disait, ta langue, la langue de tes parents, n'est pas capable de faire passer l'enseignement. D'une certaine manière, elle est inutile. Et donc, à travers cet enseignement, il va mépriser sa langue, de manière consciente ou inconsciente. Donc, ce qu'il y a lieu de faire, mais les décisions quand même, c'est l'État qui les prend. Malgré que les gens sont organisés, malgré que la volonté est là, c'est l'État qui prend les décisions. Ce qu'il y a lieu de faire, c'est au début de la scolarité, que l'enfant soit enseigné dans la langue qu'il maîtrise. Et s'il est enseigné d'abord dans la langue qu'il maîtrise, quelques années après, il peut découvrir les autres langues pour pouvoir s'ouvrir aux autres. Parce que je crois que plus on connaît de langues, plus on est accepté par les locuteurs de cette langue. Et à travers la langue, c'est une culture, c'est une autre identité. Donc il faut maîtriser sa langue, être ancré dans sa langue pour pouvoir s'ouvrir aux autres. Donc ce qu'il y a lieu de faire, c'est de commencer par sa langue maternelle, ensuite découvrir les autres langues à travers sa langue maternelle. Pour moi, c'est ça la solution. Oui. Je voudrais aussi ajouter... Oui,
Genau, das Kind kommt auf die Welt, wächst auf in seiner Muttersprache, kommuniziert dadurch mit den Lehrerinnen, Eltern, Kindern, dann kommt nicht mit den Lehrerinnen, sondern Eltern, Kindern, dann kommt es in die Schule, das heißt in die Schule im Grunde des Kolonisators, und da lernt man eben diese andere Sprache. Und dadurch wird dem Kind bewusst oder unbewusst angewöhnt, seine Muttersprache zu verachten. Denn die Botschaft ist natürlich, deine Muttersprache ist nicht in der Lage, dir wichtige Lehrinhalte zu vermitteln. Das kann gar nicht ausbleiben, dass man somit die eigene Sprache abwertet. Was jetzt getan werden müsste, der Staat muss das ja entscheiden, auch wenn die Leute organisiert sind, aber letztlich entscheidet der Staat. Was man aber machen müsste, wäre, dass zu Anfang der Schulzeit das Kind in der Sprache unterrichtet wird, die es schon beherrscht, und dann später, ein paar Jahre später, kann es anfangen, andere Sprachen zu entdecken. Denn je mehr Sprachen man kann, desto mehr wird man auch in den Ländern akzeptiert, in denen diese Sprachen gesprochen werden, und durch diese anderen Sprachen entdeckt man auch neue Kulturen.
Tout à l'heure, dans l'intervention de Zougiswa, vous aviez dit quelque chose comme il n'y a pas de mots pour exprimer certains concepts. Oui. En fait, je vous renvoie à ce que disait Cheikh Anta Diop. Cheikh Anta disait que la mine du gâte, xel moy gâte. Ça veut dire que tout ce qui existe peut être nommé par la langue. Ce n'est pas la langue qui est limitée, c'est l'esprit qui peut être limité. Nous, par exemple, au Sénégal, c'est un pays sahélien. Moi, je suis venue de Dakar avant-hier. J'ai laissé 26 degrés. Donc, c'est un pays où il fait vraiment très chaud. On ne connaît pas la neige. Puisque la neige n'existe pas chez nous, on ne peut pas avoir un mot pour expliquer la neige. On peut faire appel à des expressions qui ressemblent un peu à ça. On peut traduire par grâce ou quelque chose comme ça, mais on ne peut pas traduire par un seul mot la neige, parce que ça n'existe pas chez nous. Cela ne signifie pas que notre langue est limitée ou bien que notre esprit est limité, mais plutôt parce que ça n'existe pas chez nous. Puisque ça n'existe pas chez nous, on ne le connaît pas, on ne peut pas le nommer. En revanche, tout ce qui existe chez nous peut être nommé. Ce ne peut pas être nommé, ça veut dire que ce n'est pas la langue qui est limitée, mais plutôt l'esprit. Donc, en ce qui concerne maintenant les nouvelles technologies, on ne connaissait pas. Maintenant que ça existe, que nous connaissons, il faudrait qu'on ait un consensus, trouver des expressions, en fait que tout le monde soit d'accord là-dedans pour dire que ordinateur, on va l'appeler tel. Souris, on va l'appeler tel. C'est un peu le travail d'une linguiste sénégalaise qui fait vraiment des merveilles en ce qui concerne la langue wolof. Elle a même sorti un lexique d'informatique en wolof pour exprimer les termes des nouvelles technologies en wolof. Avant, ça ne pouvait pas se faire parce qu'on ne connaissait pas, mais maintenant que ça existe, il faudrait un consensus et qu'on dise ordinateur c'est ça, souris c'est ça, téléphone c'est ça, etc. C'est tout. Merci.
Zum Beispiel, genau. Zu dem, was Zougiswa vorhin gesagt hatte, dass es eben in den afrikanischen Sprachen keine Ausdrücke gibt für bestimmte Konzepte oder neue Technologien, kann man antworten, aber alles, was existiert, kann auch ausgedrückt werden. Das heißt, nicht die Sprache ist begrenzt, sondern unser Geist, unser Vorstellungsvermögen ist begrenzt. Zum Beispiel komme ich aus Dakar, ich komme gerade auf 26 Grad Celsius, da ist es heiß, da gibt es keinen Schnee, wir kennen keinen Schnee. Wir könnten vielleicht aus unserer Sprache Wörter nehmen, die vielleicht ein bisschen ähnlich sind, aber es gibt nicht das eine Wort für Schnee. Und das zeigt eben, nicht unsere Sprache ist begrenzt, sondern eben unser Geist. Aber auf der anderen Seite können wir für alles, was es bei uns gibt und schon immer gab, Ausdrücke finden, die haben wir schon. Das heißt, jetzt müsste es einen Konsens darüber geben, wie wir zum Beispiel in unseren Sprachen neue Technologien ausdrücken. Da müsste man einfach Wörter finden, da braucht man nicht die Fremdsprachen, man müsste eben einfach Wörter finden, jetzt wo wir Computer, Maus und so weiter haben. Und es gibt tatsächlich ein Lexikon, ein Informatiklexikon auf Wolof, wo man eben einen Konsens gefunden hat, diese ganzen technischen Dinge auf Wolof auszudrücken.
Thank you so very much. We have run out of time, which I didn't expect we would. But if there are any questions or comments from the floor, I would welcome them. I'm really sorry it went very quickly. Anybody want to say something or raise a question? And while we do take Susan Kibuli, who's put her hand up, could I just ask our guests who are visiting for the festival to just indicate that you're here, or stand, even better still, so that our audience can see you. Please stand.
The guests, you are the guests, some people so on.
So to be aware that we have on us
Esteemed people.
we have very, very esteemed people here with us. Thank you. Susan?
Thank you so very much for this extremely rich discussion. It's very hard to take in all this in just 1 hour. I think we needed more time. But there's so many things to respond to, but I'll just ask this question to any of you can answer because of time. I don't know what I've done with that. You see, when you think through our school system, especially, I want to make it general, in Africa. For example, in Uganda, where I come from, at the moment we've had this long battle with implementing Swahili as a national language. It's named on paper as a national language. The problem is that we do not teach Swahili in school, except as a subject offered at secondary school that a few people can take. And so many of us do not speak Swahili. Of course, there's also been some other factors. For example, it was the language of the army in the 1970s, and they did a good job brutalizing everybody in the language. So psychologically, so many people could not learn the language. But that aside, we have all these languages. In Uganda, we have basically 52 languages. And if you say you're going to teach, like our school system is saying, we are going, they want instruction in mother tongue from age 6 to age 9 and then transfer. But the languages are not being taught. They're taught as a few token languages are taught at university, but basically they are not being taught. So how are the teachers going to teach these languages? There are no facilities in place, and the governments are not even providing facilities, funding for these languages to be taught. So how do you then realize the teaching of these languages? Even when you say that individuals may teach themselves, not everybody can teach themselves. So how do you go around that reality?
Okay, well, we've got a bit of time, so we'll let this question simmer in the room because it's a very big and important question. And then we can hear some more comments or feedback, and then hopefully you will think about the policy, legislation. I think that's the question, environment.
I'd love to hear from you.
And what can we do, and where are we at even? So anybody else want to say something? Sarah?
First of all, thank you so much. This is not so much a question as an observation. When you were, Suleiman, when you were talking about the trauma of language acquisition, and when you spoke about how we have sort of tamed language and humanized it by sort of bringing our own variants to the language, I keep thinking about African Americans and African American writers. Language is the heart of so many African American writings, particularly Toni Morrison, people that we know, big names. And I just wonder, we don't have African Americans at the table here. I mean, this is a much bigger topic, but I think about Gullah, for example, in Georgia and South Carolina. So remnants of African languages in African American communities in America. And I think about African Americans' cultural production. When we think about other forms of, language travels through music, language travels through film, and the impact that African Americans have had on English language. So it's a bigger sort of philosophical notion, but I noticed the absence.
Am I allowed to comment and abuse my privilege? Sam.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists and our moderator for a very intensive session. Mine is a comment, and maybe you would pick up from there. I was reading Trevor Noah and the way he talks about language, or the languages he grew up with, and listening to his narrative, listening to his story, you also see this sense of trauma, in the sense that even being proficient and knowledgeable in different languages made him an outsider as well as an insider at the same time. And so, even when we talk about joys and opportunities that languages offer, and as I listen to Suleiman, Remy, and perhaps even Suki's one, the thing that comes up is that multilingualism is really a complex thing for most of us who come to Africa. Because the moment you begin to speak to a person in a language that they understand, there isn't a clear-cut, you may be considered either outsider or insider. And therefore, for me, there is that paradox of empowerment and as well as isolation, because language, the politics of language, has what I would call, that sense of belongingness and isolation. And finally, my comment about a small anecdote. The first time when I went to interview Gugu Wathiono in the US, and the first thing that he told me is, at the university where you're doing your PhD, that is the University of Bayreuth, there is a young Cameroonian who is studying Kiswahili. So, for him that was very fascinating, and as Remy said, it was quite unique. Somebody from Cameroon, going to Europe to study an African language. And for me, that is a challenge to many of us in the African continent, because there is need for our languages to also speak to one another. So that I would like to learn Shona. I would like to learn Remy's mother tongue, or father tongue, so to speak. And so I think there is also a good thing when we are talking of multilingualism, to also think about how do our African languages speak to each other. And I think that was also a challenge to my mentor, Agoi Wagoro. When we talk about translation, I think we should be thinking about translating from Luganda to Kikuyu, and that for me would be a very fascinating project. Thank you.
You've done very well to end on that note, because I've just asked Susan if I could translate her poem, that beautiful poem that she read into Kikuyu, because I could hear it as she read it in Kikuyu, but it's a valid point that you've just made. A lot of what we're doing here is throwing up randomly, a lot of issues. I just want to pause here and just make a general observation that language is a living, it's a living membrane. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it can be quite porous, and there is a lot of possibility, depending on the politics of the context, is all I would say. As Sarah has said, the African American community has made a huge contribution to global languages. If you go to Japan, you'll hear people playing jazz. You hear people performing hip-hop and so many other things. The other thing that all of us here who deal with languages know, it takes a very long time for a language to really die. A language can be extinct, but still be living. Like Latin is very present with us. Greek is very present with us, the Old Greek. Old English is still very present with us. So languages may be extinct, but they don't actually die. The other observation that I've made about human beings is that love can transcend language. Am I right? Love.
Yes.
Love can transcend language. And it allows us into an avenue of getting to know each other. Languages within themselves, even German, French, and English, can be hostile, even for their owners. Even for their owners. And Kikuyu, Kiswahili can also be places of joy and trauma. And I think they're a human entity to think about more positively in terms of how they can be more humanistic. And those of us who come from Ubuntu cultures know how critical this issue of language and democratizing language is. And I'm not saying that it's perfect, that there's no war, but also the external world that we live in impacts on what happens in language, because it's the only tool we have to express ourselves, is what I would say. But I'm so excited by this conversation. I'm not even going to try to chair it because so many ideas are coming out. But I think we will allow other people to speak.
10 more minutes.
We will allow other people to speak. And I wanted to ask Paul, as he's here, we're very lucky to have a professor of translation here, about this whole idea of belonging and alienation, if you wish to.
Actually, I was going to step into speak to what Remy has said before, since he called me up. About the fact of doctors coming from abroad with so much education and not being able to simply transmit the diagnosis to their own local patients for whom they're trained. And this does, for the most part, tend to rely on local nurses, what we now call health assistants, since it became kind of gender neutral. and what is happening is that we're finding that we need to encourage community translating, community interpreting language. We talk about the big deal of the conference interpreting and all that, but community interpreting is really important, which will be what will be helping all these people who are at the forefront of healthcare, for instance, of the continent, to be able to intercede and help out and make sure that patients are getting exactly what they're That's it. So as to the sense of belonging, it's a very touchy issue. I was going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow as well. It's that for some people, it is not entirely the case that multiple experiences is always traumatic. For some people, because of their very beginnings, their very origin, in terms of coming from the very start, multiple contexts, meaning parents from different ethnic backgrounds in Africa who may not speak the same languages. Some get exposed. Children grow up in families like that, get exposed to what we would call the vehicular language, the communication, the contact language. So in West Africa, a lot of them get exposed to Pidgin English as their main language. Now, for people like that, becoming familiar with possibilities, all those languages that are wider communication, becomes an asset, becomes a good thing. Because they have not been able to either speak their mother's language fluently or their father's language fluently, because they did not have the opportunity to communicate adequately in those two languages within the family context. Granted, there are cases where you can spend time with your grandparents and learn some of that language, but they seem to be very much in what we would call the hybrid situation, where they're in between, and so they feel more comfortable in this zone. interstitial zone where their identity seems to be better defined, and they're still just as African as everyone else. So I'm just trying to make the point that it is not always, for some, always experience. And that's just something to bring out there for you to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody, yes, so the general message is not all language situations are traumatic, and some people live permanently in monolingual trauma, and they do not know. And the fact that you're exposed to another language allows you to be aware that there's trauma somewhere and joy somewhere else. So I think that's a very well-made point. Anyone else want to say something? Don't be shy, please.
Thank you very much, and I'm really honored to be here and to hear this conversation. This is just an observation and maybe a little bit personal, but it's about the issue of language. There was the reality. The reality, I think, is very individual to every person. And because we're talking about, especially when it comes to migration, for those of us who have migrated here for whatever reason, I think language is what eventually defines you in one way or another, whether to be an insider or an outsider. Language is so relevant. And so for this, I was just observing in terms of language in Africa. I think language should be, instead of how it was just amongst, like for example in Kenya, it was just one of the languages, the 4 languages. I think the whole of Africa, maybe what the AU is talking about is Swahili, because we want the AU to be there. I think language should be a real, maybe to start off so that it is an identity for Africa. Because if it is an identity, if it can identify it as in Africa itself, I'm just thinking of a solution, just a probability, possibility. If it can be identified that, for example, Kiswahili, if it is Kiswahili, that it is an Africa for all of Africa, then there is no this shame. You understand? There is no this, then Africa, then people are proud to be Africans. Then there is no this division amongst the Africans themselves. Like he talked about when a fellow Cameroonian asked him, you get all this way just to learn Kiswahili or something like that. Because it starts with us. It's a very complex thing, but I think it all starts with the mind, us as individuals. That is just an observation. It's very wide and I can't really put it in context right now.
Just one sentence, because you used the word, it starts with the mind. Then maybe we have to bring it again, one of the central figures in Stimmen Africa's, Mzee Ngugi was speaking of decolonizing the mind, the politics of language in African literature. That's why it really starts. And as I said, being multilingual, it means I have the privilege to belong to different worlds. Okay, I have identities I can always, perform depending on the context, depending on the mood and so on. But we have to be conscious of what each identity carries along as a burden. That's the point. That's what I mean. And decolonizing the mind in the sense that we look at the case of just to answer the question that Susan has asked. The case of Uganda is very interesting when it comes to Swahili. This is a language for which this is script. It moved from the Arabic script to the Latin script. We have literature in Swahili starting from the 13th century already. But now you implement, the question is also, one thing is language policy, and the next thing is the implementation. And the problem there is the implementation. How can you expect kids to take Swahili as a subject from the 3rd class, although the first 2 years they didn't have it, and the material is coming from Kenya? That's the next thing. In my research, I had to talk to some editors in Nairobi, Jomo Kenyatta Publishing House and stuff like that. That's where you notice that's another kind of trauma that we are actually setting up. That's the problem. So at that level, we cannot talk about the colonizer or whatever. We are wrong at this level. You cannot expect kids who do not speak this language. In this case, we should have maybe Luganda and Swahili coming to it as an addition. Because by the time they have to take this in the third class, so it's a bit late, and they will never be able to compete with Samuel's side, for example, who had to take Swahili already from grade 1 and even from kindergarten. So there again, it's another level of trauma that we can work on.
It's also like, just can I just say, in Ethiopia, for example, it's a country that was never colonized. But yet again, if you go within Ethiopia, Amharic, even though Ethiopia, for example, in Ethiopia have over 70 different languages, Amharic has been the dominant part. So within Ethiopia, Amharic is seen as a colonizer of all other languages, So yes, it is an African language, but if you speak to different, grouping within, like my father's part, for example, they would see Amharic as a kind of a language that, that have forced itself on them through power. Yeah.
The same again with Swahili, the question of the role that Swahili play also in wars and revolution.
Yeah.
It's not only for Uganda important, it's also important for the Democratic Republic of Congo. At the point, it was the first language of the army. So you have people saying, I don't want you to learn this language because it killed some of our people.
So we'll give the last words to Day and Zukiswa to say a last word. The time has come to an end. I hope that you've learned as much as I have. So I'll let you. Do you want to say something?
I know, I'm fine.
Je voudrais redire ma joie d'être avec vous ce matin, d'échanger avec vous. Et encore une fois, le multilinguisme est très important, la langue maternelle est très importante, mais la langue peut être également une barrière. Moi, je ne comprends pas votre langue. Donc, tant que vous parlez, si la traduction n'est pas encore faite, je ne sais pas ce que vous dites. Et donc, nous sommes ensemble physiquement, mais d'une certaine manière, la langue nous sépare. Merci à tout le monde.
Ich möchte nochmal meine Freude ausdrücken, hier zu sein, mich mit euch auszutauschen. Mehrsprachigkeit ist sehr wichtig, Muttersprache ist sehr wichtig und zugleich kann Sprache aber eine Barriere sein. Ich verstehe eure Sprache nicht, das heißt, solange die Übersetzung noch nicht fertig ist, weiß ich nicht, was ihr sprecht, umgekehrt wisst ihr auch nicht, was ich spreche. Das heißt, wir sind körperlich quasi zusammen, sprachlich aber getrennt. Das, da haben wir es. Genau. Also, genau, und solange ich nicht verstehe, fühle ich mich natürlich als Außenseiterin, aber trotzdem ist es sehr schön, hier zu sein. Genau.
I don't really have anything to add. I think everything has been said. I just perhaps a word regarding Kiswahili. Like, there is also, I mean, in South Africa it's being introduced as a language in schools, but there is also the question then, the most spoken language, for instance, is Hausa. How then do you decide that this is the language that you're going to select, and don't you then also get in danger of marginalizing other languages? Shouldn't we, I mean, you could have it as a language a language in school, an official language, but it's also important, I think, not to ever marginalize all the other languages in preference of something else.
Yeah.
If I can have the last privilege, I'd like our two translators to stand and be recognized, because they have allowed us to see language at work in practice. Thank you very much. And thank you for being an amazing, amazing audience. Da, 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 da. Thank you.